Okay, what we are going to do now is talk about another version of a skeptical scenario, but this one's slightly different. It comes to us from a philosopher named Rene Descartes. Rene lived in the 17th century, and he's famous for giving us the evil demon argument, where we're supposed to ask ourselves whether it's possible that we're completely deceived about everything, about the external world, about mathematical truths, logical truths, because some demon is tricking us. But in order to get our minds wrapped around this particular skeptical scenario, it's important to understand what exactly Descartes' up to, because Descartes is not a skeptic. All right, so we have this term Cartesian skepticism. But Cartesian skepticism is not talking about some form of skepticism that says there is no external world. Rather, Descartes is giving us a method of skepticism, a way of using skepticism or doubting in order to establish a firm foundation of knowledge. So I like to think of this as Descartes' method of doubt. Right. So again, he's not arguing that there is no external world. Rather, he's using this way of thinking about things skeptically in order to give us reasons or some sort of an argument for why we can be justified in believing that there is an external world. So Descartes was living at a time, as I mentioned, it's in the 17th century, at a time when there was a lot of change happening in Europe. With regard to the Protestant Reformation, and the scientific revolution was on the verge of exploding with the Enlightenment, and philosophers like Hume and Immanuel Kant, and folks like Galileo and Newton. All of these different thinkers were showing that many of the things that we oftentimes take for granted were just simply false or mistaken. All of the things we typically believe needed to be rethought, needed to be explored from a new angle in a new way. So Descartes recognized that what we really need then is a new firm foundation for knowledge, a new kind of epistemology that begins with certain claims that we can know with absolute certainty, and then we start there and build our theory of knowledge out of that. So really what he's doing is he's looking for some proposition, some claim that we can know with certainty. And how he goes about establishing that claim is by doubting everything, right? So we're going to literally doubt everything we can possibly doubt. But Descartes does not think we should do this by doubting each and every one of our beliefs. Instead, he's going to doubt different types of belief, the source of our knowledge, right? Source of our beliefs. So he begins with perception. He thinks this is one of the basic, most commonsensical ways in which we take ourselves to know things, through looking at the world, perceiving the world. I see a table and I believe the table's there. I hear a noise and I believe something's happening in the other room. I smell fruit and I believe there's fruit on the table. Right. So it's using our senses through perception that we gain a lot of our knowledge. So Descartes starts there by trying to show why, our perception is oftentimes mistaken. We might have something like if you have a fishing rod and you put a fishing rod into the water, it looks like the rod is bent because of the way the light reflects through the water, even though we know that the rod is straight. So that's one very simple and obvious way in which we can tell that our perception can be mistaken. Or you look at some very large object way off in the distance and it looks small. But we know that that object is not small because we can walk up to it and experience how large it is. So our perception can fail us all the time. Another argument that Descartes explored, and he thought was far more powerful, was what he calls the dream argument. The dream argument is similar to skepticism about our perception, but it's far more radical, right? With regard to our perception, we can oftentimes check to find out when we're mistaken about something, right? So suppose that you hang your coat on a rod or like a coat rack, and so it looks like the coat is just hovering there next to the wall because you can't see the little rod or the rack that the coat is hanging on. It just looks like the coat is hanging there. And so it seems as though our perception is telling us that the coat is floating. But we know that the coat is not floating, right? Because we can pick it up and we can check to see that it's hanging on a rod. So what we need is something more challenging. And this is where the dream argument comes in. The dream argument says, oftentimes in our dreams, we cannot tell whether we're dreaming or not. And insofar as it seems plausible that we could be dreaming right now, then there's no way to tell that we're not, right? Maybe we are dreaming at all times. Our dreams can do all kinds of different weird and fanciful things, but our dreams can also be very, very realistic. I'm sure you've probably had some experience where you woke up in the middle of the night and you thought to yourself, oh, I'm so glad that was just a dream. Or maybe you're really frustrated and you want to get back to the dream because it was such a good dream, right? Those dreams are very, very vivid and very realistic. And so Descartes basically wants to generalize from those vivid, realistic dreams to the idea that we're dreaming all the time. There's no way to go back and check to find out whether we're dreaming. Or maybe it's possible that the world was created 2 minutes ago. And there's no way to check to see if the world was created 2 minutes ago. It would have been created with exactly the same things that we have going on right now. All of the same memories, all of the same experiences, everything would be the same. So that's very similar to this kind of a dream argument. Now, the dream argument is not going to be as problematic as we might initially think, because Descartes argues that there will be at least some claims, some propositions that we can know with certainty, even if we can't tell whether or not we're dreaming. So for instance, mathematical truths like 2 and 3 equals 5, that's always going to come out true, even if we're dreaming, right? So it's always going to be the case that 2 and 3 equals 5, or certain logical proofs, certain logical principles, like a contradiction, it can never be true. That'll always be the case, even if we're dreaming. Or certain geometrical truths in geometry, like having shapes and certain sizes, those things will be the case even if we're dreaming. Or maybe you've got some dream where, all of the colors have been switched around and changed. Maybe the grass is purple and the sky is, maybe the sky is completely red, and, all of the people you ever meet are orange. All these weird, fanciful ways in which you might be dreaming. Even if that's the case, Descartes argues that things like color itself has to come from somewhere. The colors might be switched around in a lot of weird ways in our dreams, but color must come from outside of our dreams. The shapes might be all strange and changing all the time, but nonetheless, shape itself must come from outside of our dreams. And similar points will be made about mathematical truths and logical truths. These truths must come from outside of our dreams. And so there's at least some way to test whether we're dreaming or not with regard to some claims that are always going to be true. Mathematical claims, logical claims, and so forth. So what we then come to is what's known as the evil demon argument. All right, so the way the evil demon argument works is like this. Suppose that there's some demon, not God. Descartes doesn't want to use God because God's supposed to have this special position of moral goodness. God is not the sort of thing that would ever tempt us or confuse or trick us. But maybe there's a demon. Maybe there's a demon that's just as powerful as God. And the demon wants nothing else except for to trick us and deceive us all day long, every single day. And that would include mathematical truths, So we believe that 2 and 3 equals 5, but that's just because the demon is tricking us. It doesn't really equal 5. We believe certain logical truths, but that's because of the demon. We believe that we're perceiving tables and chairs in the external world, but that's just what the evil demon is causing us to experience. This is just a deception. This is all fanciful because the evil demon is tricking us. So how does Descartes respond to this challenge? Descartes argues, let the demon deceive me. If the demon is deceiving me, I must exist in order to be deceived in the first place. So if I'm doubting my own existence, I have to be there to do the doubting. If I'm asking myself, do tables and chairs really exist? At least I know I exist because I have to be there in order to question whether there are any tables and chairs. This is known as Descartes' Cogito argument. In Latin, cogito ergo sum basically means I think, therefore I am. Or another way of putting this is I'm doubting, therefore I exist. Right? So the argument is just 2 lines. The first line just says, I'm thinking, or I'm doubting. The second line says, I must exist. Because if something is doing the doubting, that thing has to exist in order to do the doubting. Let the evil demon deceive me all day long. At least I know I exist. And so Descartes takes himself to have shown that I exist. I must be there. I am, because I couldn't possibly not be there if I'm doubting in the first place. Right? So that's one claim, one piece of knowledge that Descartes thinks that he's shown we can know with absolute certainty that I exist. There's no way that it could possibly be false. Now, the next thing that Descartes will need to do is try to use this piece of knowledge, this clear and distinct idea that I exist, that can't possibly be false. Use that to then build up to knowledge about the external world. The way he's going to try to do that is by showing that God exists, right? He's going to argue that I have a clear and distinct idea about God, and that includes this idea that God is not a deceiver. So God would not allow me to be wrong about certain beliefs regarding the external world, like whether there's tables and chairs. And since I can trust that God exists and is not a deceiver, then I can believe that tables and chairs exist, right? I can know that with certainty. Turns out that that argument is problematic for several different reasons. It looks like it's going to be circular, which is known as Descartes' circle, which is what we'll talk about in a future video.